Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a great day today, and in this video we're going to be doing a review for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which came out in 2022 on Disney+. Now if you're not familiar with this, it takes place 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, and that would have been 9 years before A New Hope, so it's just kind of in between the prequels and original trilogy. And this was a series that a lot of people found disappointing, and I definitely understand why. And a lot of people also really liked it, which I understand why as well. And overall, I kind of have mixed feelings about it. At the end of the day, if I had to choose if I'd go positive or negative overall, I would say positive, but it definitely is very mixed. There's a lot of flaws in here that I wish weren't in here. But let's kind of start off the review with what works in it. First of all, you have Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. That is the main thing that I think people should not be taking for granted, because that's just so awesome. It's so great that he returned. He just does great in the role. It does a good job of him being in a different stage of life, processing the failure and the events that occurred in the prequels. And a lot of people have been saying, oh, this is just another deconstruction of a character. They did it with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. They did it with Indiana Jones. Why do these characters have to just grow up to be depressed? And I get what they're saying, but it actually makes perfect sense in this scenario. Because 99% of the Jedi were murdered, and that's a tough thing for him to process. It's just hard for him to live with. So seeing him on Tatooine is really neat. And I definitely like that we get to see more of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. And Leia had a pretty big role in the story, and the actress that played her actually did a pretty good job. And overall, the character development in this series I just think is done really well, especially with Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, and then the dynamic with him and Darth Vader, also known as Anakin Skywalker. And I think this does a great job of this being right in the middle of in between the prequels and the original trilogy in terms of how Darth Vader acts as a character, because he's not as mature as he is in the original trilogy. He's not quite there, but he's still intimidating. And I think this is really the part where he's like fully breaking away from the Anakin Skywalker that's still left in him and just trying to go full bad guy. But you get to see a glimpse of kind of that Anakin Skywalker still in him. Just him not being quite as wise yet, but still also just feeling like this younger version of Darth Vader. I just think it does an excellent job of that. And the final battle in this series is just so good between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. It's so satisfying. It hits on an emotional level. And the action throughout this series, I would say, is also pretty good overall. The music is also great. And there's a lot of neat stuff they just do in here with the Star Wars lore. Obviously, this kind of changed the canon from what happened in between the prequels and original trilogy. So in A New Hope, when Darth Vader tells Obi-Wan, "When I left you, I was but a learner, now I am the master," it's officially referring to the final battle in this series. And I think they did a good job of him defeating Darth Vader without obviously killing him. And I also think it makes sense why Darth Vader immediately knew that Obi-Wan Kenobi was on the ship in A New Hope. He was just so certain. And there's just a lot of neat stuff this explores with the Empire obviously rising, getting to see more of that kind of stuff, as well as the remaining Jedi on the run in the Jedi Hunters. That's kind of a cool concept. And different people that aren't like necessarily part of the main rebellion, but are clearly against the Empire and trying to make a difference in the galaxy. And I also thought it was really cool how they had the one fake Jedi guy who kind of used magnets and trickery to try to trick people into thinking he knew how to use the Force and whatnot. The reason I think that's cool is because it kind of establishes there are people like that in this universe, con artists that are able to trick people into thinking they're Jedi. And I think that better helps explain why Han Solo doesn't really believe in that stuff in the original trilogy, because he probably ran into people like that. And there is some pretty cool fan service in here, like when Obi-Wan Kenobi finally says hello there, and you get to see Palpatine and the ghost of Qui-Gon. With all that being said, though, there were a lot of flaws in this show that I was just hoping it wouldn't have. And what makes it so frustrating is that they were pretty easy to avoid. But let's kind of dive into what doesn't work with this show. First of all, the character Reva is probably the most poorly written Star Wars character, and she plays a huge role into this story. But the thing is, her motivation just doesn't make any sense, because she was like a first-hand witness of Anakin murdering younglings. So to get revenge on him or something, she made it her goal to murder more Jedi, more younglings. There is just no justification for that logic. Also, it waits until the 5th episode for her to have any really good character development, and then it immediately kills her off, only for her to survive, even though it's a stab wound in the stomach, which is exactly what killed Qui-Gon. But that kind of stuff just doesn't mean anything anymore in Star Wars, which is honestly really sad. And then she comes back in the 6th episode to kind of attack Luke, but he doesn't know what's going on because obviously he has to stay with the canon, and it is honestly the most terrible stuff I've ever seen in Star Wars. I mean, it is cool to see more of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru in that sequence, but it is not worth it at all. I don't think that adds anything interesting to the Star Wars lore, and it's definitely not cool that it's literally cutting to that while we're trying to watch Darth Vader and Obi-Wan fight in the final battle. So that's just so frustrating. There are also just a lot of dumb moments in this show, a lot of bad execution in certain areas. Like, for example, a chase sequence in the 1st episode where Leia is outrunning adults who are just like hitting their heads on branches. I could not believe my eyes when I was watching that episode. There's also another sequence when Obi-Wan and Leia are trying to get through this like laser fence, and there's clearly enough room to walk around it. It's like the middle of the desert, and they just make such a big deal of having to turn the fence off. It's just moments like that where you just have no clue what they're doing. You also have the 4th episode, which is just Obi-Wan rescuing Leia another time. There's some character development in it, but at the end of the day, it was kind of pointless because it doesn't really want to kill off any of the established characters that we've had time to actually care about them. It kills off Wade and tries to make a huge deal, even though he was in like 2 seconds of that show. That became such a meme. It was actually really funny though on the internet. And then you have them escaping the Imperial base by Obi-Wan disguising himself as one of the Imperials and hiding Leia in his coat. It just feels like something out of a cartoon. It would have made more sense if he actually like maybe shaved or something and actually wore the full uniform and put Leia in like a suitcase or something. That would have looked less suspicious. It's just unbelievably bad in certain moments. Also, the visuals were a little underwhelming for Star Wars standards. Star Wars usually doesn't struggle with the visuals, but the cinematography and kind of the areas that they chose to film seemed a little bit dull, although people are making edits to try to improve on that kind of stuff. And speaking of which, people are wanting it to be a movie because it probably should have been a movie at the end of the day. Just the formula for how all the story plays out, I think, would have made a better movie than a 6-episode series. So overall, it's an entertaining show, but it definitely didn't reach its potential. I think it definitely had the potential to be about as good as The Empire Strikes Back, but the execution just wasn't there in so many areas. So overall, on the quality scale of 0 to 100, we'll give it a 72%. And I would definitely recommend you check this out if you're a fan of Star Wars and you haven't already. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.